Now we're going to actually start using a knife. Knives come in plastic or metal and various shapes and sizes. I find the one that's most useful for me, and especially for what I'm going to do with this picture, is this kind of shape here. It's the diamond shape, the one that comes to quite a nice point. Occasionally you'll get knives which have a rounded end. I find sometimes they can be a little problematical because they can leave little round shapes, and these are quite good for getting in corners with because they've got a little pointy end. So that's the one I'm going to be using. This is the shape of knife I'm going to be using to do most of the picture with. Plastic or metal, it doesn't really matter. They work both as well. So let's start off with this one. There are a few main marks that you can make with a knife as opposed to a brush, and these are the main ways I'm going to use the knife in this picture. So the first way of using it is using just the edge of the knife. We put the paint on the edge of the knife and you chop it like that. You just bash it onto the surface and you'll get lines, which you may or may not want, depending on what you're painting. But it will all become apparent as I go through the picture. So that's using the edge of the knife. The main method is using the side of the knife. So you pick up some paint and we use on the edge of the knife, the side of the knife, and we're just putting it on like this, using the side of the knife. That will give you texture, directional texture, depending on what you want. And then the third way is using the flat of the knife, which is putting the paint on the bottom of the knife and just pressing it down and pulling it up. You notice when you do that, it goes into little ridges. You can see all these interesting little shapes going on here. So that's the other method. So we've got the chopping, the side of the knife, spreading it around like this, and the flat of the knife where you're pulling it up into little peaks. So these are the three methods that we're going to use to do this painting today. So let's start. We're going to start with the sky. For the sky, we're going to use the side of the knife. So what we're going to do, we're going to pick the paint up and we're going to spread it on like this in chunks. I'll explain as I'm going along. First of all, we need to decide what colour it is. I've decided this is quite a yellowy sky, so we're going to mix the original colour that we decided on, which was Naples yellow and white. I'm going to give myself a bit of a clean palette because with knife painting you do tend to need a little bit more room on the palette. Let's get a clean knife here. Let's clean that one off. If you need to clean your knives off, just put them on the table like that and give them a bit of a scrape and get rid of any old paint on there. Right, so I decided Naples yellow and white. Some Naples yellow and some white. If you've got quite a big area to cover, if you're doing quite a big painting, make sure, and you're mixing up a strange colour or even just a colour you've made up yourself, try and make sure you've got enough of it to cover the area you need to cover before you start, because it's quite difficult to then mix up the colour again and get a proper match. So let's just make sure we've got enough here. So I think if I mix all this together, this is the white and the Naples yellow. Now the method I use to do this, I make sure there's no streaks left in the paint. So if I want a creamy yellowy white, I keep mixing it around until there's no streaks left in it at all. So it's a nice creamy texture. I might as well use the whole lot actually, because I think I need to cover a reasonable amount. I'm going to hold the palette in my hand for this because I need to be closer to it, and sometimes if you're picking up a big dollop of paint you don't want to be dripping across the floor. So get that mixed up when it's all nice and in together and you can't see any streaky bits in. Let's start. Now as I say, we're going to be using the side of the knife, so we're going to be picking up a lump of paint like that and putting it down like this. What I'm not going to be doing is putting it down in blocks, so I'm not going to be going along 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 because it will end up looking like bricks. So what I'm going to do for the sky, I'm going to put put it on using multi-directional strokes. So I'm going to pick up a lump of paint. Starting at the very top, I'm going to put the paint on. You'll notice that I'm moving my hand around at different directions. There is a reason for this, which will become apparent a little later on. So I'm not going to go across in rows, and I'm not going to go down or crossways. I'm just doing short, multi-directional strokes. If you can hear a lot of scraping, you're probably not putting on enough paint. So make sure that you're getting a reasonable amount of paint on. I can go around those branches to a certain extent. I can actually go over them, just leave me a little suggestion of where they are. And just remember to move around so you get lots of lines and chunks. Do that little bit in between those tree trunks. Doesn't matter if you overlap the trees a little bit, because we can go over that later. So bring it down, just drag it down into the tops of those trees, because they're going to be coming up in a minute. Hope we've got enough paint now. I think we have. I think we've got more than enough, really. Better to have too much than not enough. So that's what it should look like, quite chunky. Whether or not you can see much of your branch, that's just to give me a rough idea of where that branch was going. I'm going to go in between here. There isn't much sky at the top there because the trees are quite tall up there, so we just have a little bit coming from the top. Make sure there's no, if there are any little teeny weeny gaps that you've missed, hopefully that nice underpainting we did will come through so it won't show. I think that will do for my sky. So next I'm moving on to this bit. If I can remember what colour I mixed up, which I think I can, I think it was a mixture of cobalt blue and white and a little bit of green. So I'm going to use the paint I had on my palette before, but I'm going to get a bit more of it. So use the cobalt. I'll put a little bit of that sky colour in because I might as well use it up, and it's pretty similar. It's whitish. The yellow won't hurt. And then I'm going to get a bit of that perylene green, which was the dark grey green. Put a tiny bit of that in there just to grey it down a bit, because most greens in the distance go nice and cool and grey. That's quite a nice colour. It's a little bit dark, so get some more white. There's a bit on there I can have. Just get a bit of that in there. Quite like that colour, but that's more like the colours on the tops of the tree. So I'm going to be working dark to light. Dark to light means that I'm going to be putting all the darks on first, mediums and then lights. At the moment we'll just think in 3 layers, dark, medium, light. There are more than 3, but we'll keep it simple. So I'm going to be doing the dark bits first, from the bottom going upwards, because it's quite important to move the knife in the direction the things are going. So I'm going to be doing the darks, then I'm going to come down with the mediums and then bring the tops up into the sky. Ideally this should be dry, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to dry that sky off first with a hairdryer. When you're drying the picture, don't hold the hairdryer in one place too close, because you'll dry one area and not the other. So we need to keep the hairdryer moving, keep it going round so it dries evenly. Okay, so I've dried that off now. It's reasonably dry, ready to move on to the next stage. Because we're going from background to foreground, my next thing to do will be these in the back here. We're also working from dark to light, so I'm going to do the dark bits first, and then I'm going to drag the light bits over the top. So let's try and find this colour again. I think it was a mixture of blue, white, Payne's grey, a bit of raw umber, a bit of green. So let's try, see what we can come up with. So I've got some raw umber here. I've got some of that perylene green, which is that very, very dark greeny grey. That's a mixture of cobalt white and a bit of the sky colour. So let's see if we can make that dark. So I'm going to put the green with the brown, which gives me a nice greeny grey, which is sort of the colour I'm after here. But it's a little bit dark, so I'll put a little bit of white in it. if you put Naples yellow in it instead, it won't be that different. So that's pretty good. If you are in doubt about getting the colour right, put a little bit of it on your knife and just hold it against your picture. Then you can see straight away if you're getting anywhere close to it. This is okay for the medium tones. So if I use something a little bit darker, mix that colour up again, mix the green and the brown together and keep it very dark. For the dark ones, maybe those at the front, and then that for my medium and that for my light. And I should adding a little bit of brown as I'm coming here because I feel it's getting slightly warmer as it's coming towards me. So we're going to start with the darks. I'm not going to try and get every little bush and shrub and thing here. I'm just giving an impression of what that looks like, and it's in the background, so you don't want to make the details too strong. So I'm going to start off using the side of the knife. I'm going to pick the paint up on the side like that, on the edge, and I'm going to, if you want a flat line with a knife, you have to use the flat edge of the knife. So I'm going to put the flat edge down on the straight line, as it were, and I'm going to bring it up like that. I'm just going to scrape it upwards like that. It's all going to look very dark to start with, so don't worry too much if you think, oh gosh, that's too dark. We are going to be putting layers on top of this, but because we're working dark to light, we're going to be putting all the darks on first. So it will look quite dark, it will look quite flat, but don't worry about it at this stage. So I'm going to put the darks on, and then we're going to move to our medium colour, and we're just going to chop a bit of that over the top quite randomly, because as I say, I'm not interested in copying every line. I'm just putting it on with what we decided was the side of the knife. So just doing like this. If we've got any bits in between anywhere, turn the knife on the side and go upwards. It's a lot easier. Because the things are growing upwards, you want some lines going that way as they're growing upwards. And now we're coming to this pale colour, which we decided was a little bit more Naples yellow in there. So if you want to make sure, again, just put your knife next to your picture, check if you're roughly within the range of the colour. I'm going to drag a little bit more of that over the top of that medium colour. Tap it on, chop some upward lines, which will give you the suggestion of a few tree trunks. So there are here, but I'm not going to get too picky and get very precise. I'm just going to chop a few upward ones, which will give you a suggestion that there's a few tree trunks going on back in the distance. And now when I get to the top edge, I'm going to go even lighter. So it's almost like you can't tell the difference between where the trees stop and the sky starts. So it's just going to be a little bit darker than the sky. So I'm going to get that sky colour there and just mix it in with the green and the grey. And then I'm going to drag it from the sky downwards just to get the tops of my trees. It will be a broken mark, but that's good because that's what we want, these little broken bits which imply the little bits of tree with the light coming through them. So I'm going to drag that down. Because you've put nice texture on the sky, it will give you nice bitty lumpy shapes, which are just what we want for these distant trees. So you may get little bits of your underpainting coming through, which doesn't matter because they were quite warm. I realised my underpainting had some browns in it, which is fine. I don't mind a few little bits of warm coming through. So that's the idea. It's a little bit straight, I feel. I think I should have one or two coming a bit higher up. It's a little bit, and these are taller, and then it goes down there. So I might just drag couple of little bits just a bit higher up, and this is coming a lot higher up here, and it's also becoming a lot warmer. If I try and see what's behind those branches, I can see lots of browns and things, so I'm going to put a little bit more brown in these as I come forward, and also make them a little stronger, because you'll notice as you come towards you the tones get stronger. So a bit of green, that Paraline green, bit of the raw umber, And I'm going to chop that. I don't want it too dark because it's got to be slightly lighter than the trees in front, so I don't want to make it too strong, but I do want it strong. I'm going to start it here where it will sort of coming into the, gradually fading into that bluey grey colour. So I'm going to put a few little choppy marks, and then I'm going to gradually change to, note I sort of imagined a line of trees coming up here, so let's get them in the gaps there. You'll notice as you rub it over the texture on the sky, you will get some nice little broken shapes, which is why we made the sky the texture we did. Don't worry that my tree trunks are disappearing at this moment, because they will be at the moment, but when we get them in they will become apparent. So you get a bit of that dark green in there as well, because there's some greeny grey bits. This is all background stuff, so we can, I'm sure where the back of the river comes, just below there. So I think the back of the river comes about there. So we'll put a line just to show where the back of the water comes. We don't want to lose the edge of that. And then we're going to do whatever, put all this greeny brown stuff in between our tree trunks. Remember, there's no highlights at the moment, so it is going to look a little flat. It will look a bit dark, a bit flat, and a bit uninteresting at this stage, but don't worry, because it will come to life later. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put this nice bit of yellow in here. I'm going to start off at the back, which is, as it happens, the lightest bit, so I'm going to start with the light, and I'm going to chop in some of these darker bits as I come down. I say chop in, we're going to use the edge of the knife this time, because when you want flat lines, as this grass is quite flat across, we're going to use the side of the knife. We're not going to be going downwards in big chunks or that way, we're just going to be following the contour of the field, which in this case is fairly flat. Right, so I've got Naples yellow, some processed yellow, some of this nice dark pearline green, and I've put a little bit of the bright olive green. It's pale olive green, because I think there's some quite bright greens in there. So let's see what we can do. I'm going to change knives now to the metal one, because it's slightly longer along the side, and if you've got quite a big area to do and you want it quite flat, the longer edge you've got, the less time it'll take you. So we'll start at the back. As you can see, there's a lot of light on the back there, for which I might need a little bit drop of white actually. So let's put a bit of white on there as well. Now, normally, as I said before, we'd be working dark to light, so you might think I'm going to put the darks on first, but in this case it's more important to work background to foreground, because we've got things in front of that field. So I'm going to start at the back, which just happens to be the lightest. That's why I'm doing that. So let's get some white, put a tiny bit of that nice processed yellow in, make it really bright. That's pretty nice. Yeah, that'll do. It's a bit lighter than that, but that is a little bit of camera glare. One has to realise what the camera does as well. So let's put a chunk of that going across. I'm using the edge of the knife now because I want a nice straight edge for the back of that field. And I'm chopping it a little bit to get some nice straight lines. I'm going to put a little bit behind the tree. So if you chop into the tree a little bit, it really doesn't matter. Better to chop into it a little bit than avoid it completely, because we're obviously going to go over that. I'm going to put that little bit of light on the field there, just to remind me where that, I'm just going to drag a little bit of that light colour across to remind me where that is as well. Now I'm going to get a tiny little bit darker by putting a touch of that green in. I'm also going to put a little bit of this olive green, because I think it's a nice sunny bright green. Make it a little bit darker than the bright yellow without being too scary. Again, if you're not sure of your colour, mix it up, put your knife against the picture. When you think that's about right, then you can go. So there we go, that's pretty good. So that's going to be my next row of colour. I'm going to chop that into it. You can see how those lines are integrating amongst the paint. It's obviously still wet, which is good. So a little bit will blend and a little bit will be separate. The field is actually curving down. Unfortunately, there's a branch that is right on that edge, so I'm going to probably try and straighten that up a little bit. I'm not too keen on the falling downhill bit. There's a little bit of the field just showing between those trees, so that might be quite important just for creating a bit of distance. So it doesn't matter if you go over your trees, it will just lead your eye through those trees. Let's chop a little bit more of that nice bright yellow one. You can go down in steps, but don't make blocks out of it. Don't go down too much. Just keep it more chopping across in lines. Now, as we come towards these trees, obviously there's shadows and bits of things getting darker, so we'll come down with the light so far, and then we'll start. This is such a nice colour. I like this colour. We're going to start bringing some of this green, make it slightly darker, and we'll put a bit of that perylene green in, which is a bit bluey, so we need to sunny it up a bit, warm it up a bit with a bit of that olive. And between the two, squish it around a lot till it's blended. And that needs to be maybe a little bit darker, so we'll put a bit more of that in. Maybe a touch more of that. Scrape it up and squish it down again, scrape it up and squish it down, and it should mix quite well. So we've mixed that up nicely. I think that's quite good for the paler green. We can chop it into the colour we've just put down. At this stage it doesn't really matter if it blends a little bit, because there are lots of mottled markings on this field, so we're not trying to keep these sections separate. We're going to let them all blend in a little bit to each other. And remember, you've got your underpainting to hang it all together, so chop that in. You'll notice it's starting to get darker as we come to the front, so let's put a little bit more of that olive green on there, because I think that's quite a nice colour. And yes, let's use a bit of that darker green as well. So we use a bit of that, maybe use a bit of that neat, although it is a little bit scary. I think I might have to just tone it down a little with that. Squish it around till you get the colour you think you want. I think that's about right. That's a nice sort of medium sappy green colour. And scrape it up on the side of the knife, and we're just going to chop that in to the two colours we've got on there. You note the green goes right to the back of the field there. If you need a straight edge, you need to turn the knife upwards like that to make that straight edge, and then you can flatten it out again with the rest of the knife, just so that doesn't look like it's going upwards. You need to keep it flat along. I'm going to put some very dark bits in. I say very dark, not that dark, but much darker bits as we're coming towards this bank, because it's sort of going over the corner. Remember, we are going to put some highlights on top of this, perhaps at a later stage, so don't worry if it looks a bit solid and a bit lumpy, although it's looking all right at the moment. I'm getting some nice different shades of green in there, but we want to make it look like it comes forward, which it does. It's starting to get a bit brown and warm in the front there, but we'll do that in a minute. So chopping that in. There isn't actually much dark behind there, so I'll put a little bit of light over that. It's a little bit paler that side of the tree. Chop that in. While I've got some of this on here, I'm just going to put a little bit of light on there to remind me that there's a little bit of light on that bank. There isn't much, but I'm just going to use the colour while I've got it, just to remind me there's a bit on the edge of that bank there. Okay, so that will do for now. I've just noticed this isn't a completely straight line. This tree here, which is about here, comes forward a little bit, and I'm not too keen on this very straight line. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to the colour I had for my trees at the back. You can adjust things as you go along. You don't have to do your first mark isn't your only mark. You can go back, scrape a little bit of that greeny browny grey that I had on there, and I'm just going to jump this down slightly in front so that it it looks like it's slightly in front of the other row of trees. That will also help with the illusion of it coming closer and closer. Because I decided to straighten out my field and not have it going around a corner, unfortunately it's given me a rather hard straight edge, so I'm just going to drag some of that in there to give the illusion that that's slightly further forward. Don't worry about any odd marks on the trees because they'll all get covered up. That's better. I think that breaks that edge up a bit. I wasn't too keen on that very straight line, so that's okay. When I come to do this bit, we're going to do the very, very dark coming up from the bottom, a bit similar to the way we did these trees at the back. We're going to do the really dark coming up from the bottom, and then we're going to do some slightly lighter marks coming over. The highlights go on last, so the whole picture will look quite dark. I keep saying that, but it is important not to get tempted too early to start putting the light bits on. So I'm going to do the dark coming up from the bottom, really dark, and then chop some medium greens coming down here, ignoring the very strong highlights for now, which go on last. So I just need to fill that area in. So which colours will I use for this? Well, we mixed up a really nice colour before with the brown. I think it was the raw umber and the perylene green, which made a really nice dark greeny brown. Let's have a go at that again. So we've got some perylene green, a bit of raw umber, and I'm also going to stick a few warms in here. I'm going to put a little bit of perhaps raw sienna, which is a nice warm colour, and maybe at some stage drop a little bit of red of some sort. So again, primary magenta, put a little bit of that on there, which I can mix with the yellow to make some nice warm oranges. I have got a really nice bright cadmium orange there, but it's a bit scary, and I think I might leave it till the final stages for that. Clean your knife off. You don't need water with a knife, so get out the habit of doing this, because you might end up adding water to your picture, which you don't want to do. So just wipe it off on a rag, on some paper, or on your t-shirt, whatever. Here we go then, let's do that. We're going to mix up that perylene green, a bit of raw umber, beautiful dark blacky brown colour. Nice, yeah, I think that's about right. That's about as dark as I can go. It doesn't look black and unnatural. It's got a bit of brown in there, a bit of green. It's all good. So I'm going to pick it up on the left hand edge of the knife because I'm going to be going upwards. So if I put it on the other side, I'd need to be going downwards. Because I need to be going upwards, I need to put it on that side of the knife. Just bear that in mind. So I'm going to start from the bottom of that bank, and I'm just going to roughly mark in where the edge of the bank is, and I'm just going to drag it upwards. It isn't a bolt straight line, the bank, but the water's very dark there, and you can't actually see where the water starts and the bank stops. So I'm going to bear that in mind. So I'm just going to chop that on, drag it up into the bank, keeping the bottom of the knife flat, because as the bank goes around the corner, you want it to go around with flat edges. You don't want it to look like it's going up in the air. So I'm not going to do a curve like that. I'm going to do a curve going along with using the flat of the knife. So I'm going around the corner, if you like, in sort of steps like that. Think of it in steps, going flat rather than like that. So once I've got the edge of that marked out, I can just drag some dark upwards. At this stage, I'm going to tap it. I'm going to tap it because I'm going to make some marks like we did with the flat of the knife. What that will give me is some nice, interesting little shapes that I can get some of these ferns when I come to do the highlights. You'll see how I'm going to do it, but at the moment I'm just going to tap it in various directions to give some nice texture amongst those darks. Now I'm going to get some greeny bits because it's starting to get lighter as it's approaching the edge of the bank where the light is. So I'm going to add some of that green that I had a minute ago just to that dark colour. Just go one tone up. You don't have to go suddenly very bright, just keep it subtle. So just move one tone up, and we're going to tap a bit of that on the top. It's quite a murky colour, it's not very nice at the moment because we haven't done any highlights. Again, I'm going to chop it on just to get the paint on. I don't know if I've got quite enough here. And then I'm just going to randomly tap it, pressing the knife and pulling it to make some nice little textures, which will help me when I come to do the highlights later. Then I'm going to do some greeny yellow bits just to integrate it into that field so it doesn't look like it just stops. I'm not going to go very bright, I'm just going to get maybe some of that light green, put a little bit of the dark in there, maybe a touch of yellow. And a little bit of that raw sienna, because I decided there was some quite warm bits in here. It's a little bit pale, so I'm going to put some more raw umber, a bit more of that perrine green. Using quite a limited palette really here, which is good because it will hang it, it'll keep it together. And just going to put a bit of that. As I say, it will all look a bit dark and miserable at the moment, so don't get tempted to put any highlights in yet. That's just, I just know that's got a little bit of warm in it. A little bit of warm, tap it on to give you the nice directional things. Little bit of raw sienna, I'm going to put that on its own just to, so that when I come to do some bits with some little bits of dead bracken and things on, I've got a colour to remind me. So a bit of, it's quite random this, it's not in a very regimental way, it's just random, pushing, pulling, chopping, a bit of everything really, just to get some texture, because that's going to make, when I drag the highlights on that, that will make all these little interesting bits around here. So while I've got all these colours, I might as well do the bank on the other side. So we had the dark at the bottom, didn't we? The dark with the darker green on the top. Not thinking highlights right at the moment. So again, I'm using the underneath of the knife to get that edge going round, make it a little bit darker, a little bit lighter there, put a little bit more of that dark green in there. It's almost, looks almost black here. So although I'm going around a corner, I'm going to keep the knife flat so it goes round flat like that, not in a curve. And then I'm going to chop it up into the top of the bank, which is getting slightly lighter. I might use a slightly smaller knife here, so I'm going to change to the same shape, only slightly smaller, just because it's easier to get in those little areas around here. Just going to chop it. Note I'm moving the knife like this because I'm thinking the bank is going over, so I'm actually moving the knife the way the bank is going, which will help me when I come to put the highlights on, as you'll see in a moment. So this bit here is now dried. While I've been doing that bit, this is fairly dried out. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put a few, before I put the darks on here, I'm going to put a few little highlights, because if you'll notice I've got a very thin strip of yellow there, and if you notice the field comes down in a curve here, because I'm going to put some light on top of this dark. So that's what I'm going to do, just to get the shape of that bank. So before I start working on the highlights of the bank, I'm just going to get the curve of that field a little more accurately. So I'm going to go back to my big knife, which at the moment is a little bit dirty, so I'm going to clean it off, just scrape it with another knife like that and wipe it off, because you don't want anything contaminating nice bright colour. Should feel nice and smooth along the bottom, no knobbly bits on there. Okay, so I'm going to mix up some of this paler green and I'm going to drag it across those nice little ridges that I did with the darker green. So I'm going to get the yellow again, a bit of Naples and a bit of this perylene green. So it's not very dark, but it's maybe a little bit darker than that. Tiny touch more. Just mix it in. If you go too dark, just go back light again, put a little bit more yellow, maybe a bit of that. I've still got that nice colour that I had from the sky, the Naples yellow and white, which is quite handy. I don't like that very much, it's a little bit dull, so I'm going to put a little bit of that pale olive green in there. just to sunny it up a bit. It's gone a little bit chalky looking. But there is a way around that. If that happens, we can deal with that at the end. So let's get that sort of green colour there, which I think is pretty close to there. And I'm just going to drag it. Remember, I've already made the horizontal marks with my knife underneath, so I don't then have to chop it again over the top. I can literally just drag it. So I'm going to get a little bit of paint along the bottom of the knife and just drag it across. If you get any strange bits, don't worry too much, we can sort those out at the end. So I'm just going to bring the lighter bit of this field, what I'm actually aiming for is to bring the lighter bit a bit further down, because there's a bit more of a curve here. So I'm just dragging it, and what it's doing, it's picking up on all the little knobbly bits I made with all the little bits of texture I made with the knife underneath. I go further than I need to because I'm going to then start dragging some highlights over the bank. Okay, that's just pulled that edge down. Put a little bit more on, just to make some little light bits along that edge there, along the bottom of the trees. That's a bit better, it's got a bit more of a curve in it now. Okay, I'm going to go back to the darks I had earlier because I'm just going to mark in very roughly this bit here. If you'll notice, it's composed mainly of grass. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put in some main dark shapes and then I'm going to chop. I'm not going to do too many details because I haven't done the water yet. So I'm just going to chop in just to remind me that that's grass. So I'm going to get some nice dark green. It's mostly the perylene. I'm going to put a little bit of yellow in it. And because it's near the front, I'm going to put a little bit of warm in it, so I'm going to put a bit of that raw sienna in, mix it round till it's a nice dark warm green colour, and then I'm just going to chop in some basic dark shapes just to remind me. Note I'm now going upwards because I'm thinking grass is growing upwards. Again, I'm not going in blocks or downwards, I'm going the way the thing is going. So again, chopping some marks going upwards. That will help to remind me that it's grass when I come to do and then I'm just going to use the edge. Do you remember that thing we did the first time, just chopping? Like here, just chopping using the edge of the knife. So I'm just going to make those into choppy shapes to remind me that they're grass. And then just put a little bit of lighter on the top. Although we're not doing highlights yet, it's just to remind me that it gets lighter as it's coming up. I'm not going to do the top edge because I need to do the water first, but that's just to remind me what's there and what it is. And plus it can help, it's drying. Once I've done that, it can be drying, so it'll save you a little bit of time. I'm not going to put that bit in for obvious reasons. I've got to do the water underneath first.